Hey everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and let me know if you've ever had this problem. The problem is that you're working on a sketch in your software, in your DAW, and the sketch is kind of getting somewhere, but then you close the project because, you have responsibilities in life, and because you can't quite remember what the project was, you end up never opening that project again, and basically the loop or the sketch that you were working on gets lost in time forever. I would argue that one of the biggest reasons you never open that project again is because you never did an audio bounce to MP3 that you could listen to outside of the studio, and the reason you never did an audio bounce is because you never did an arrangement or any kind of storytelling with that loop or idea. And so to address this issue, I want to introduce you today to a concept I call the sketch arrangement. And that is an arrangement that is the simplest possible form of an arrangement possible, but that's still good enough to export. And so you can then listen to your song in different contexts, in different locations, and then come back and decide to open up the project again because you'll have some fresh ideas for it. Let me tell you about this sketch arrangement and how to implement it real quickly. First of all, to make this simpler to understand, if you're working in techno, I want you to think in 3 layers. I want you to think of all the instruments that contribute to the low groove of your track. I want you to think of all the instruments that contribute to the high groove of your track. And then I want you to think of the instruments that sit in between, in the mids, that act kind of like the human voice does, that occupy the same frequencies as the human voice. So that's 3 groups of elements. That's the low infrastructure of your track, the high infrastructure of your track, and the mids of your track. If you've got some elements in those 3 categories, you've basically got yourself a musical sketch that you can turn into a sketch arrangement. To show you an example of this in practice, here's a sketch I'm working on for Torc. This is everything that contributes to the low groove just as a group. Here's the high groove. This is everything that contributes to the highs just as a group. And here's the mid element, the element that I think carries the musical DNA of the track and that acts like a voice. In this case, it even uses vocal style timbrels. I've been composing this in a 16-bar loop, just kind of trying to get different nuances out of it. And because I'm running out of time for today on this project, I want to export this so I can make an opinion about it and come back to this project later, right? But if I leave it in this loop state, chances are I'm never going to open it again. That's just how my brain works, and probably how some of your brains works as well. I don't know. So to get to a sketch arrangement, this is the mental model I want us to work towards, okay? Let's unpack this for a second. What we've got is our 3 layers. We've got our low layer, which we're going to repeat in blocks of 16 5 times. So we're going to have 5 times the same 16-bar loop for our low groove. Then we're going to add to that the high groove, but only for the middle 3. So for the second, the third, and the fourth block of 16. And then in between these 2, we're going to put the mid element from start to finish, also 5 blocks, just like the low groove was. Each block of 16 bars lasts about 30 seconds. So this leaves us with a composition that is about 2.5 minutes long. Ish. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the middle block for the low groove. We're going to remove the low groove entirely from the middle block. Then from the high groove, we're going to remove the second half of the middle block, leaving a moment in that middle block where there is no low or high groove playing and only the mids are playing, right? And then we're going to find on our mids, on the instrument that fills up the mids, we're going to find some parameter that allows us to modulate the energy level of those mids. And very often, the simplest one for that would be the filter cutoff frequency. So opening the filter a little bit and perhaps lengthening the envelopes a little bit. Look at the decay or release times on your envelope, or maybe increasing the delay or reverb time on that element to make it stretch out more over time. So what we're going to automate is during that moment when it's just the mids playing, we're going to have the mids just become a slightly larger version of themselves and then come back to the regular settings for that 4th block. So overall, we've got 5 moments in our song, let's say. The first one is just the low groove plus the mids playing. Then it's the low grooves, the mids and the highs playing. Then it's the break, which is the lows go away, the highs stay for a while, but eventually they go away as well. And the mid really gets to expand its voice a little bit so that we get to hear a more energetic version of itself before bringing it back to the normal level for the fourth block, which is again the highs, the lows, and the mids all playing at the same time. And then the last block is the outro, which is just the lows and the mids playing again. Doing this sketch arrangement only takes a few minutes. It really is not a big process. It's just a question of duplicating time 5 times, removing the relevant parts, and adjusting the automation a little bit on the mids. But now you'll be able to export that sketch, put it in a playlist, listen to it outside of the studio, make some ideas about it, and then get motivated to open it up again and get back into it. Later on, when you have taken a bit more distance of the composition, you can decide to maybe do a different arrangement, and you can think about a little bit more what the arrangement really needs. But that's not the goal for today. Let me go back to that composition that I was working on for Torc and implement this real quick for you. All right, so here we are back at my sketch. And as you can see, we've got this 32 bar long thing. And so what I'll do is I'm just going to Command-Shift-D, which duplicates time. So it duplicates everything once, twice, 3, and 4 times, leaving me with 5 copies of the exact same. And let me, just for clarity, give all of these a number. So the idea is that the beginning and the end has none of the high groove. So we're going to just remove that entirely. And then there's the vocal layer or the mid layer throughout the whole thing. And the low groove, we're going to take it entirely away for the mids. By the way, this little layer here also has some lows, so I remove that. And then for the high groove here, we're going to take away the second half of it. Just this. Poof. And so the vocal layer, now we just got to find some automation parameters that's going to make this vocal layer seem larger or smaller than itself. So let me solo it. I discovered that on this plugin, on the Transgate, if I shorten or lengthen this, here it gets really small. And longer gets really long. So this is a very cool parameter to automate. So first I'll decide where do I want it to usually sit in the mix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this parameter, and then I can see this dotted line here moving as well. And I'm going to make an automation point before and after when I want it to change. And then I'm going to draw a third automation point that's going to let it evolve to be bigger. Even more, let's go. There we go. And it's back to being a small version of itself when the beat will drop with everything all together. So that the idea is then that when I export this and I just hit play, I can hear my idea for the low groove, my idea for the mids. Then once I've gotten sick of that, we'll be adding in the highs. I can evaluate if the highs in my sketch are good. Then we'll skip ahead, by the way. There we go. And we'll skip to this transition here as well. So now we take away the low energy, which creates some tension, right? We can keep the highs, even though I find in this composition they're a bit harsh. And now we hear just the mid layer building up. And there we go. Cool. And so now this element over time can then work its way out to the outro. And this now is something that I can export. I'm going to slap a limiter on there, push it up to the point where it's just about touching the limiter. I'll talk more about that in a different video. I'll set the master to 0 and I'll export it. Then that export I'm going to put into maybe a SoundCloud playlist or whatever way you use to listen to your tracks outside of the studio environment. Like let's say when you're going to go for a jog or do some sports or driving around or whatever. right? I'll talk more about that workflow in a different video. But then in those different contexts, you can make opinions about this track and you will have the appetites to come back and open it up and keep working on it. Whereas if I had left it as a 32 bar loop, I wouldn't have exported it. I probably wouldn't have thought about it anymore in my day-to-day life, and it would disappear in the sands of time and just gather dust on my hard drive like so many projects already have. So there you go. That's the concept of the sketch arrangement. If you're a beginner and you find music production overall still quite overwhelming and there's a lot of concepts sort of missing, go follow my Foundations of Electronic Music course. It's aimed at absolute beginners to end up making their first tracks. It's really seen as a coherent music education rather than just some random tutorials on a little topic here, a little topic there, right? Come show us on the Discord channel what you did with this. Go follow Torc on SoundCloud, why don't you? And until next time, stay producing, be good to one another, and take care. Bye-bye.